Welcome back to the Headstorm Forecast, brought to you by Headstorm, the show that teaches you how to engineer growth by learning from industry luminaries to provide you with tactical steps you can use tomorrow. I'm John Humphrey, guest host of Headstorm Forecast. I've spent my entire career helping services companies grow revenue. Our methodology and software helps founders and business developers grow sales. Check us out at connectforlife.com to see how our tools can help you grow your revenue. In today's forecast, Headstorm's Chief Information Security Officer, Clay Gooch, is joined by John Allen. John is the president and managing agent of Community Insurance Advisors. He is at the forefront of pioneering data-driven solutions aimed at some of today's thorniest issues. Today, he's talking about his approach to cyber insurance. He's also giving us an inside look at his method for bringing compliance awareness to small and medium-sized companies by providing them with all of the answers they need up front. John, it's an honor. Let's get started.
Clay Gooch, Chief Information Security Officer for Headstorm. I'm joined here today with John Allen, who's president with Community Insurance Advisors.
Glad to be here.
And we're here to talk cybersecurity insurance.
Yes, we are.
It's a huge topic these days, especially with all the ransomware that we've seen during the pandemic. I mean, it's exploded, and then also over the past 5 years. That people don't know what to do with cybersecurity insurance. They just think, I'll just get a policy like I would, my homeowner's policy, and it's going to cover everything. So what I want to know, what does cybersecurity insurance cover?
Well, it can cover a lot of different things. I think, the big two that come up now are ransomware and social engineering, right? Those are the ones that I think have everybody really, really concerned. But it covers things like wire transfer fraud. It'll cover any of the breach expense categories that you have. I think when you have a breach, think about incident investigations, and you have to notify customers that it happened. And then you're going to have class action activity too. So fines and penalties are another part of it. So depending on kind of what source you're looking at, it's sort of the all-encompassing, whatever the breach does to your business, that's going to come, insurance is going to come in and take care of that for you.
Yeah, and in personal experience, I've worked a couple of breach response projects that were in the payment card industry,
right.
To where Visa and MasterCard would come out and say, "Guess what, payment processor? You now have to pay us to reissue card numbers."
Right.
I mean, is that covered or is it typically uncovered? I mean, it's just a common example that we've seen.
It is covered. The kicker, though, is you can't assume that all policies cover everything, and that's the thing. A lot of these coverages are opt-in coverages, so you have to look at the policy form and talk with your agent and say, look, these are the things that keep me awake at night. How do I know that this thing or that thing is covered? And where does it say that it is? And importantly also, where are the exclusions? What's not covered specifically, so that you understand really what is insurance going to do for you? Because a lot of people go into the insurance thing thinking, well, insurance is there to cover anything that happens, and that's not necessarily true. It's not an absolute catch-all. It's very specific about what it will and what it won't pay for.
So is it, just thinking of years past and working with some of my prior clients,
right.
Cybersecurity insurance, it was, legal said, hey, come here, review this policy, we're good, right? And up until 3 years ago, I feel like that was it, because the insurance world didn't know how to cover that.
It's evolved and evolving quickly. And what I would tell you is I think large companies have a pretty good handle on it. Medium-sized companies, more and more of them do. I tend to play with more of the small companies. And there are a whole lot of misnomers in that space about what's covered and what's not. Why do I need cyber? I think everybody has seen and read the press,
of course,
about what's happening. But I don't know that, I think there's a lot of the head in the sand mentality. It wouldn't happen to me. And there's things that small companies don't realize that can happen to them. And I think it's sort of this inertia thing that they just don't want to get after it. And could it be because of cost? It could be that. Could it be because of complexity? I think one of the big challenges I have is that cyber is such a gargantuan issue, and it's so difficult for people to understand. People in your world get it. I'm not a technology guy. I'm an insurance/business guy, and so a lot of these terms and things that I've learned by talking to people like you.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't even take that step, and so there's this chasm of understanding with, why do I need it? And so people just abdicate and say, I'll worry about it later, right?
Yeah, and that's typical for a small, medium-sized business.
Right.
I mean, is they're focused on how do I actually make money. I mean,
Right.
they're in that, I don't want to call it entrepreneurial spirit mode, but they're trying to take that small business and grow it into the medium-sized business, and ensure anything they could do to get money
Right.
to stay within the company and not pay for it.
They're worried about payroll. They're worried about HR
Exactly.
issues. They're worried about other things that are the day-to-day, and I get it because their margins aren't necessarily as good, and especially with the things that we've had with the coronavirus the last 2 years. It's been very disruptive to the workplace, and so a lot of businesses just say, well, yeah, I get that that's important, but let's move on. So the challenge that I see with cyber in the small business space is how do we make it so that they understand what the threat is, clearly how it impacts them. Then what are the things I have to understand about my own business to help me deal with the threat? And then things like, is it expensive? And, so I feel like I have to be the easy button, if you will.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
For helping people understand how they're going to deal with this. Because at the end of the day, it's really not that complex to deal with it, right? It's really not.
Well, and everybody hears insurance. They
Right.
they pull up their homeowner's declaration page, and you're like, I don't even want to start with this,
Right.
And that I think is one of the things that's just scaring people away, and not knowing what you brought up earlier, which is it's now like almost an opt-in
Right.
cybersecurity insurance.
Right.
So how do we how do customers and how do your clients know what to do and what to opt into?
So I take them through an exercise. The first thing I tell people is, look, there's 4 fundamental steps to dealing with cyber for a small business. One is do an assessment. Make sure you understand what your own landscape looks like.
Yeah.
Second is make sure you got great security protocols in place. And I know you preach that, right?
Right.
And have them outside security protocols. Have somebody from outside monitoring to make sure they're catching exceptions. There's one of the companies that I've dealt with in the past, they do these security scans for people that swear that they have no problems at all. And they'll find some computer with a 24-hour stretch where somebody tried to log in 3,000 times.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a problem there, and it's
Yeah.
just sitting, right? So we just want people to take a look at it, just understand whether or not you got that. Third thing is, if something happens, who are you going to call? You can't be thinking about that at the time that it happens because you're under duress at that point. And then insurance is really the last piece. Insurance is the last piece because it says, all right, so if you've done all these other things, where is insurance going to plug gaps, right? To have a policy without doing the other things first, you may not even get paid if you're not minding the store first. So it's sort of a strategic and tactical play with people about how they should be dealing with the cyber threat, right?
It's almost like if as a homeowner, if I have, say, a dog that's a rabid dog at my house, I don't get that opt-in coverage from the insurance agency. Somebody, a friend's got their kid over, they get bit. Parents try to go after me. Is that covered under my insurance policy? No.
Right.
It's very much like that.
And so people are resistant to asking the question, I think, is part of what you're asking here, and they are because they don't understand it. And another huge challenge in my space is that there are not a lot of people, insurance people, that talk about cyber. The simple reason, truthfully, is that some of the cyber policies are so cheap that they're similar in premium to what a homeowner's policy costs. So think about this. If you're an insurance person and you've been struggling with, you got sales quotas or you have other priorities, a homeowner policy is very easy in my world to write.
Yeah.
A cyber policy is more complex, so you have to know more about it. You have to spend more time on it. This mindset of time is money says, well, if I'm a salesperson, what's in it for me with cyber? I think the answer is, I think there's such a big community of businesses that need it that it's going to be, whether it's growing now or growing at some point in the future, it's growing.
Most small to medium-sized businesses are focused on bringing revenue in and growing their businesses. In other words, they're focused on the day-to-day. So cyber insurance tends to either be something that you get quickly and then forget about, or something that just sits on the back burner for you to get to at some point in the future. It should be a top priority because if an attack happens, it can save your company. In fact, 60% of small businesses hit by a cyber attack go out of business within 1 year. Whether that was attack from ransomware or social engineering, it doesn't matter. Insurance isn't the end-all, be-all, but is an important piece of the puzzle. Preferably, It's the piece that fills in the gaps after you've done an assessment, set up security protocols, and created your incident response plan. For the next segment in the forecast, we will dive into why cybersecurity is vital in the early stages of your company.
Do you see this as becoming like almost a requirement within that world? You know, we know that if you buy a car, you're required by the state to have insurance, auto insurance, right? Is there something like that coming down the pike, you think, for small and medium-sized businesses?
Well, I think for all businesses. I've read that I think there are 4 different states, that maybe more than that now, that were considering legislation that said, you know, if you don't have cyber insurance and you get breached, you're on the hook for, you know, whatever. And I haven't read the legislation, but I've heard it's gotten to that point where there's some talk about, which really makes sense. I mean, you think about it, because if your business is a kind of business that interacts with a lot of different other businesses, and you could theoretically contaminate that business, you could take out a big chunk of some part of the economy because of your recklessness. Not that you did it intentionally, but if you didn't take adequate steps to protect yourself and the people that you interact with, you know, are you then on the hook for that, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point. You know, we talk about how, you know, supply chain. And how we've seen just from the pandemic, and how much just the supply chain as products, as things on the store shelves, as we couldn't get toilet paper, we couldn't get certain things during the pandemic, and even now cars are sitting, you know, chips aren't going in cars. You know, you think about that from a software or a business perspective. If some business, say the chip manufacturer or the silica manufacturer gets ransomware, well, they're a small business. They're like, well, sucks to be us, but what's the downstream impact? And then what happens when their customers go after them?
And I think about people that do online web services, for example. So let's say their website gets hit. And now they can't offer their website services for 3 days. But the website is the site where a lot of their customers are relying on that site for the revenue. They don't have backup mechanisms necessarily that are adept enough. So now they've got the revenue exposure from these clients that didn't get hit, and how many iterations downstream does that go? There's a domino effect there, right? Insurance can cover that, but the bigger, you know, I like to give the Titanic example. You know, when the Titanic sank, I'm sure whoever the insurance company was paid for the loss of the ship, but at the end of the day, they didn't have a ship. They got the money back, but they didn't have a ship. Our objective here is to keep the enterprise running, and then let insurance come in and step in and fix whatever the problem is. But that's just a speed bump, not an end of the business conversation, right? So really, I think the priority here, yes, insurance is important, but the bigger priority in my mind is to make sure that the companies have all these protocols in place and security measures in place so that they can continue to operate efficiently. Then let insurance pay for what insurance can fix for you. So do you want to, as a business owner, do you want to spend your time remediating all these things that are happening, notifying all the clients, or do you want the insurance company to do it? And then if you have fines and penalties, you want to pay for that out of company reserves, or do you want the insurance dollars to pay for it? And that's where risk mitigation really comes in. It's not just about what's my premium, but what are the benefits I'm getting out of this experience?
Yeah, right? And that's a good point. So in thinking about when something goes bump in the night, and you're pulling up of course, every company has a cybersecurity incident response plan.
Hopefully.
I hope everybody has a cybersecurity incident response plan. And with that, you know, they're going down their call tree of who to call. I mean, insurance, it almost always is at the very bottom. It's always legal, and then it's waking up the CFO, and then it's waking up the CEO, and then insurance is always an afterthought because people are like, let's get all hands on deck and start solving the problem. Let's phone a friend. Let's do all this stuff. Get going, but in instances like that, they may not get paid out.
No, Clay, I look at it. Insurance is one language. IT stuff is another language. A lot of the companies we talk to, they say, well, they put this whole cyber thing on IT. It's not just an IT issue. You know, the technical aspects of that are, but there's a physical issue, right? Who are you allowing to access your different points of contact in your cyber sphere? And how are your employees behaving? Is the employer behavior an IT issue? It might be, the ways they should behave might be driven by IT, but at the end of the day, I see that more as an HR issue. And then what about your reputation as a business? Does IT wear that when something breaks, or does the entire enterprise wear it? So you really have to have the whole organization bought into managing cyber as a process. You manage the facilities if you're a manufacturing company. You manage the sales and marketing efforts if you're doing anything like that. And I think that you should manage cyber the same way. Don't necessarily allocate the cyber fix to an IT budget, but make sure you're looking at it as an enterprise-wide kind of an activity, right?
Exactly. You have to. I mean,
Yeah.
cyber encompasses all things. It's really the one, everybody says information technology encompasses all the things. Not really. I mean, cyber, if one carbon-based life form fails and clicks that phishing email, it's game over.
Yeah.
No amount of technical safeguards that you've put in place, as long as that email got in, it's game over.
It's like your car has a seatbelt, but if you never wear it, does it really help you? Right? It's a different widget, but it's the same idea.
Right.
We had a funny story, I think. We had an employee she thought it would be helpful to send out an email sharing all the passwords so we all had the updated passwords. She didn't send it out, but that is such a classic mindset. I think so many people see some of these technical protocols as speed bumps to what they're doing and how they're living their daily lives, and they don't necessarily understand that I mean, if you're going to do that, you might as well not have passwords at the end of the day, right?
That's right. And, you're we're going down a little bit of a different track, which is great because I start thinking through how do you make it adaptable and easy for the employees?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if cyber or technology for that part, if it's inhibiting, best practice, it's inhibiting like securing your environment, and it's just adding on, bad habits, something's got to change.
You've got to balance. You've got to have a balance.
Right.
You've got to make it to where there's certain protocols, and I think a lot of it's the culture. Do you have policies and procedures in a ring binder, and are they sitting on a shelf, or do you actually live it? And so there's ways that some of the more progressive companies are incorporating this into their culture. There's ongoing training. Maybe they make it fun, if you can call cyber training fun, but I think you can, there's ways to make it to where you're engaging people, and I think if you're doing that, then you're good. But getting back to earlier, we're talking about, I mean, the challenge in all of this is you've got a lot of companies that will just throw this issue at the IT department.
Exactly.
And it's not just an IT issue. And so you've really got to get all parties actively engaged in it. And when you've got people from the IT world speaking a different language than the insurance world, that may or may not speak the boardroom language and finance language, so our effort is to try and translate all the cyber things into boardroom speak, and not use insurance jargon that's so above somebody's head that they're going to fall asleep with it.
How do we make it? One of the things that that I've talked to clients about is they're like, I don't know where to get started.
Right.
I don't know what, we talked earlier about doing, they've got to have they've got to do an assessment. They've got to understand, how are they protecting themselves from safeguards. But how do they know? I mean, a lot of companies are like, I don't know. I have email. I'm using this server over here. I've got workstations. I think that's it.
Well, a couple things I do. So, I said earlier that ransomware and social engineering are two of the really hot buttons. Well, one of our carriers has a questionnaire that's specific to each of those points, right?
Okay.
So I say to people, you know what, fill out the questionnaire, it's free. It doesn't mean you're even applying for insurance, but the insurance companies are asking you things that concern insurance companies. Why? Because they're paying claims on them. They're not just, passively asking you things. So that's sort of a tell. That's really the answer key, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And so if you go through that as an enterprise owner and you have trouble with any of that stuff, you probably have a problem with whether or not you're covered. And the truth is, I think the ransomware questionnaire has something like 22 questions on it. One of the companies says if you don't get at least 20 of them right, it's a fail. Nobody gets anything approaching 20 right, and so that right there starts the dialogue, right?
Yeah.
About what are you missing,
And that's exactly right. I mean, it's starting. What's good about that, and I think that's relatively new, because I don't
think
remember a lot of it in the past. It's like they just talk to the legal team, or they'll talk to chief information security officer, or they'll talk to the CIO and say, "Hey, you guys doing everything looks good?
Right.
Sure." Okay, and then they'll pass it along. But I think now we're starting to see self-assessment questionnaires. We're starting to see a lot of that, and a lot of it requiring attestation.
Right.
Going into, I hate using the term audit, but going into
that's right.
that kind of
That's
role.
right. A lot of the old questionnaires used to be just real basic. A 17-year-old could fill them out, and there was no check and balance. Now they've gotten a lot more detailed, And here's the kicker. So if you fill out this form and you say yes when the real answer is no, maybe you don't know, but you guess because you don't want to,
Right.
feel dumb or whatever. But you fill it out, and then you have a claim. And then when the claims people get involved, they say, well, you said you did X. Show me where you did X. Well, excuse me, I didn't really know the answer to that, so I put this down. Well, you in essence, not intentionally, but you in essence lied on the application, which can therefore nullify coverage. So, which right?
That's a big one.
So it is a big one, and so there's no shame in asking. If you're not an IT person, you're not going to know the answers to this stuff. You're not. But that all the more speaks to the point about why you need to involve, the IT group and the different groups working together to make sure that they're understanding how to fill out these questionnaires, right?
That's wild. I mean, we've of course insurance companies. I know you're part of that, but we all see that as they don't want to pay anything out, right? In a lot of times, right? It's they want to pay out what the policy dictates, and not what as I, the consumer,
Right.
or I as the person who has the insurance thinks I should get paid out.
One of the biggest numbers in all of insurance, doesn't matter whether it's cyber or home and auto, it doesn't matter where it is, but it's with the gap in understanding between what you thought you got when you bought the policy versus what's really covered. And if you really go through this exercise of understanding what do I need and show me where it says on here that I'm covered for these things, then I can assure you will be paid in that scenario. Now, when there's a run of activity in the insurance marketplace, so like if we have a natural disaster, now all of a sudden, like we did a year ago here, right?
Right.
With the freeze.
Exactly.
When there's a lot of claims, there's going to be more scrutiny on claims payouts because the insurance profitability formula is total premium taken in, less claims paid out. And if you're paying a lot of claims because it's one of those years, well, then there's going to be more scrutiny because that affects the P&L. But by itself, if the policy says that you're going to be paid for X, then you'll be paid for it. And that's the thing. So you really have to do your diligence. We live in sort of this fast, easy, cheap culture now. Just get it done. Don't waste my time. I just want to get a policy.
Yep.
You've got to lock in long enough to understand what you're getting. If you understand that the stakes are the size that they are for these kind of breaches, 60% of small businesses that have a breach don't survive. 60% of small businesses
They're out of business.
They're
They're
out
done.
of business within 6 months. That's the stat that I keep reading. We can nickel and dime whether it's 50 or whether it's 60. It doesn't matter.
It's
a
greater
significant
than
amount.
half. I mean,
It's a
that's
significant
massive.
amount. And if you understand that that's the stake and it could happen to you, then you should at least take a long enough amount of time to understand what safeguards you need to take to make sure that you're covered. That's it.
So, as a small business owner, or as a medium-sized business owner, where do I go from here? What do I do?
Well, we've got a roadmap that says, look, here are the basics that you do. It's the 4 points I outlined earlier. I know people in each of those spaces. I know people that can do an upfront assessment. It can get very complex or not complex.
Right.
I know a lot of security companies. You guys are terrific at doing stuff like that. That right. But that's it. You've got to get around somebody that you trust to kind of help you understand what the landscape looks like and get some clear definition. Just start there. Just get the definition and get that done, and then work into the plan. I like to use the expression: you don't have to build your church for Easter Sunday. You don't have to get it all done at one time.
Yeah.
Just start. Get it identified, understand what you have to do, work it into the budget. Maybe this year you go, 20% of whatever the recommendation is. And then as you grow, you've got an architecture in place so that you can scale whatever things are happening so you are able to head off the biggest risk that's likely to happen to you, right?
Yeah.
And that's really the biggest thing. That's just don't do nothing, do something. Talk to somebody that knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing
Right.
is talk to, if your insurance advisor or in there they just said, oh yeah, here, you just need to sign this policy. It's fine.
Right.
You're covered for all the cyber insurance. You probably should say, hold up,
Ask the question.
let's not do this. Let's start talking through what does this actually cover.
Yeah.
And because, like you said, I mean, it's all becoming opt-in coverage and ransomware and social media attacks.
When I talk to clients, I don't go by myself and talk about cyber insurance. I always go with somebody that's an IT person that can talk about the technical side of the cyber thing so that the client gets an idea of what the full picture looks like. And invariably that talk goes to, John, thank you. I'm going to talk to the security people for a while.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to you. And that's the way it should work, though. In my mind,
right.
that's exactly the way it should work, because buying a policy without having the protocols in place, it's
Yeah.
why?
People often liken it to, your auto insurance and homeowners insurance,
Right.
because that's what a lot of, let's face it, everybody goes through that, at least once a year.
That's it.
And you look through that and you just think that it's easy. And they want all this stuff to be easy.
Funny thing about insurance, though, it's one of the very few things in life that I can think of that people buy it and they know what they're paying for it, but they a lot of times have absolutely no idea what's in it.
That's a good point.
And it's even worse with cyber. I mean, it's bad with auto insurance. Right. It's terrible with cyber.
Yeah, because it's I'm driving down 635 behind us. Right. I get hit. I'm like, I assume that I'm covered by that, but
maybe not.
Maybe not. I don't know.
But you should take cyber that way. And again, I just think I think people are afraid to feel stupid. They don't want to feel like they've been hoodwinked into something they didn't need. They don't, come on, we're sensationalizing the press. We're just pick any reason under the sun. But I think if you just think about what it does to your business, what it could do, look at what the downsides are. How much would it cost me to make sure that I've got stuff in place? How easy is it? It doesn't mean I have to hire a bunch of people. We're more and more in a fractional world anyway. So, somebody like you could give them 4 hours a week or whatever the amount of time is.
That's right.
And you deal with it on that level. So you're dealing with a higher level professional. It's not a full-time gig for them. And now you've got I look at it like you've got a team of all-stars at every step of the phase that's helping you, and they've got expertise and they've got economies of scale that you can't replicate for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing
Right.
is being able to bring along the experts along with you to understand what does ransomware mean, and walk along those paths.
Thanks for saying that. There's the insurance companies have been notorious for having really drab, bland literature. It's I'm not going to say it's worse than watching some of the TV channels that are all news oriented, right?
Right. Yeah.
But now there's some newer players out there that are actually technology companies that happen to do insurance, and so they're a whole lot more creative about how they put the information out. It's a lot easier to understand. So it doesn't take a whole lot to interpret what a coverage element is and what it does. But again, if you're dealing with somebody that's in the technical space and they've helped you identify what the risk categories are, and then you can see where it aligns with the insurance, that answers the question for you. It's really as simple as that.
That's good. That's good because there's just so much paperwork, so many definitions. So it's a dictionary at the end of the policy, and so having somebody like yourself to help wade through that is great.
Anytime I can help, I'm glad to do it.
It's difficult to know where to start. Most of the time, the people trying to navigate the insurance process aren't people with extensive knowledge of what's needed. In small companies, responsibility tends to fall on the founder, while in others, it's a legal team or CIO. People tend to buy insurance without really knowing what's in it. Just think about your auto coverage. Do you know what's in your auto policy, or do you just assume that you'll be taken care of when an accident happens? For cyber insurance, the person filling out the paperwork often doesn't have a good understanding of cybersecurity or cyber insurance. And a misunderstanding in the contracting process can lead to a nullification of coverage. So, it's important to ask as many questions as possible while going through the process. The Forecast next segment will give you the inside scoop on how ransomware is changing over time. Stick around.
Ransomware is a specific piece of software that is designed to encrypt your files and have you pay the ransomee, the attackers, money in Bitcoin or some other untraceable currency. Ransomware is very much prevalent in today's world, and it's getting ever harder to stop just because the attackers are just moving rapidly through organizations and really just making them move as, they just adapt. They adapt very quickly, much like we do as humans. The key thing here really is it's incredibly profitable. The reason that ransomware is so profitable is because insurance companies, when companies like us, we have a thing called cybersecurity insurance. So to prevent if we do get breached or if we get ransomed or something like that, the insurance company will then pay that ransom for us. And so they make it at such small amounts, like less than $500,000, say for a smaller organization, a small to medium-sized business, that it's like, sure, we'll just pay it and move on.
And Clay was talking about adaptability of the attackers over the years and how they continue to become more sophisticated and smart. One of the things, as it pertains to insurance, is they're actually going after cyber insurance providers now. And they're going to go out, get their client list, get their amounts that they have policies on, and then they shuffle over to the network and they say, hey, I know your policy is at $500. I'm going to ask for $499. And they're like, gee wilkers, I guess we're paying that. And that's what's happening a lot now, and that's, put things into a bit of a conundrum as from an insurer perspective, but that is one example of the adaptability and how these folks are kind of going about that now.
Yeah, we've started to see really an uptick in attackers going after law firms as well, and going after really the high-profile law firms that are the attorneys for, Rudy Giuliani, that are for the Trump organization, that are for, high-profile sports folks. So really, that's a treasure trove of data. So anyway, on to more information. All right, so companies that got breached. So first of all, here's a little tidbit. Every 11 seconds, a company is ransomwared. 11 seconds. That's a lot. That's a lot, right? So think about that. And then the average payout is somewhere around the $4 million mark. Companies will pay $4 million just
Right
to
then,
get
right then. It's
Yeah.
11 seconds.
That's right. Yeah. So
$4
another
million
company. Yeah,
gone.
Yep. Interesting, huh?
So here's another kind of concept here. So as it pertains to security, there's, good hygiene and practices that you go through as a company. But there's also an element of this that you think about through the lens of, having children or having pets, and you want to train them and raise them so they are good contributing members of the household. And so you try to discourage bad behavior and encourage good behavior. Unfortunately, what you're looking at right there is encouraging bad behavior. So 90% of the time, folks are literally just saying, okay, here you go. Just give me my stuff back. Please, thank you. And so what that does is another reason, it provides another reason why people are starting to take this up as a full-time profession. Or when we talk about ransom ops, you've heard about software as a service, platform as a service. Ransomware as a service was a big one a couple years when it kind of came online, and now it's become a little bit more streamlined and professional. Yep. So you don't even have to know how to do this yourself anymore. You literally can pay somebody to go attack on your behalf and deploy ransomware.
Yeah, right around $100.
Yep.
Is the going rate right now?
Yes, that is the right reaction. $100.
$100.
Wild.
And they will custom build ransomware for you, and they will even help you deploy it to a targeted organization. And you think about that for a second. Yeah. Yeah, and no, I'm not going to tell you where to go find that either. But just think about that for a second. $100. So now you think about the opportunity cost. $100. I just said the average payout's $4 million. Yeah, I'll spend $100 for the potential to make $4 million in Bitcoin. Yeah, especially now that Bitcoin's going up instead of down. But the thing to think about, some of these organizations that are doing the ransomware, like for the Colonial Pipeline, they were able to recover about half the amount of the Bitcoin for them because it was stored in a crypto wallet in California. So the FBI was able to seize that server and get the tokens and then arrest the folks and get the money back. But that's a very rare case. Most of the systems and stuff are overseas, untouchable, and it's getting increasingly harder to get the money back.
Thanks, as always, for tuning in for the forecast brought to you by Headstorm with your hosts, John Humphrey and Clay Gooch. As a part of this vast community, we hope these tips and insights will make a difference, future-proof your business, your mindset, and help you surpass your expectations. Feel free to reach out.